This is WFYI News Now. Election Day is here. It's November 5th, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, information on voting and a hotline to answer questions you might have throughout the day. How to make sure your absentee mail-in ballots are counted. And a bit of non-election related news. Union leaders at the General Motors Fort Wayne assembly plant say GM violated its contract with the United Auto Workers.
What I want to come out of this, I want this company to start abiding by our local contract, our national contract, and we won't have any problems. There won't be a fight.
Those stories are coming up. But first, polls are open for the 2024 general election. Marion County residents can vote until 6 p.m. at any of the county's voting centers. A valid form of photo identification is needed, such as a driver's license, a U.S. passport, a state identification card, or a military ID. To see your sample ballot and find voting centers near you, go to indy.gov. And for a full voter guide, including fact-checked questionnaires sent to over 80 candidates, go to WFYI.org. And Hoosiers with questions about voting or issues at their polling place can call a free voter hotline on Election Day. Common Cause Indiana is once again offering its 866-hour vote hotline the entire time the polls are open. Executive Director Julia Vaughn says it's important to offer a nonpartisan resource that people can trust.
We're not coming in with any agenda. We don't support any candidates or political parties. Our goal is to ensure that every eligible voter can cast their vote.
Vaughn says the hotline can be used before going to vote, answering questions about where the polling place is and what ID a person needs. And she says it's also there to help people who encounter bureaucratic or administrative barriers at the polling place itself.
You know, there's a lot of rules for voting here in Indiana, and it's pretty easy for a voter to get tripped up.
The hotline is available in English, Spanish, Arabic, and several Asian languages, such as Hindi and Mandarin. Indiana absentee mail-in ballots must be received by county election administrators by 6 p.m. That means if you still have yours, it's too late to put it in the mail. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith reports on what you need to know to make sure your ballot gets counted.
Indiana's absentee vote-by-mail ballot deadline doesn't consider when that ballot was put in the mail or postmarked. It only counts if the county election administrator receives it by 6 p.m. on Election Day. But you don't have to mail in that ballot. You or a family member can return the signed, sealed envelope with ballot inside to the County Election Board office by that Election Day deadline. If you don't know where that is or can't make it there, there is another option. If you have an absentee mail-in ballot, you can go to your polling place on Election Day, surrender that ballot, and cast an in-person ballot instead. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
And for our final story today, union leaders at the General Motors Fort Wayne assembly plant say GM violated its contract with United Auto Workers. As Indiana Public Broadcasting's Tamoria Cunningham reports, UAW workers at the plant voted to authorize a strike ahead of negotiations expected this week.
Rich Letourneau is the bargaining chairman for UAW Local 2209. He says GM has managers on the assembly line in place of union workers, and he says that violates the contract. Letourneau says he does not want to strike, but will if necessary.
What I want to come out of this, I want this company to start abiding by our local contract, our national contract, and we won't have any problems. There won't be a fight.
In a statement, GM says it's continuing to meet with the UAW to discuss their concerns and says the union has no legal grounds to strike. Letourneau disagrees. He says when the company brings in new administration, they do not understand the agreement and don't want to work with the union. A GM website says more than 4,000 people work at the Fort Wayne assembly plant. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Tamoria Cunningham.
Although the union voted to authorize a strike, it does not necessarily mean workers will strike. That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by Drew Daudelin, with support from the news team at WFYI and public media journalists across the state. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. Kendall Antron produced our music, and I'm your host, Abriana Herron. If you liked today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.